And on the 12th of May, 1828, I heard a loud noise in the heavens, and the Spirit instantly appeared to me and said that the serpent was loosened, and that Christ had laid down the yoke he had borne for the sins of men, and that I should take it on and fight against the serpent. For the time was fast approaching when the first should be last, and the last should be first.
Do not find yourself mistaken now.
Was not Christ crucified?
God's time is always near. He set the North Star in the heavens. He gave me the strength in my limbs. He meant I should be free.
So as you can see, our Black history leaders, at least the ones who paved the way for us to be free out of those chains, they all had a spiritual connection with the God of the Bible. This is what inspired them to do what they did. And in fact, even Harriet Tubman's nickname was called Moses. And even in a general sense, I believe our ancestors had always been a spiritual people. I even believe they knew about the God of the Bible way before European contact, and I'll explain why shortly. When slavery kicked off in America, they came up with a thing called slave codes. This meant black slaves couldn't vote, own firearms, on land. They weren't allowed to gather in large groups. It was required for them to have a curfew, and it was also illegal for them to read or write. Now, it's important to know that these black slaves were imported from Africa, where they had their own language that they could read and write in. So it was only illegal for them to learn how to read and write in the English language that their oppressors spoke in. They also probably feared that these black slaves would be able to read the Bibles for themselves to see how hypocritical these slave owners was, which was inevitably to come anyway, as we heard Frederick Douglass give his testimony of the hypocrisy of this nation claiming to be Christian. Now, just because these Negro slaves weren't allowed to learn how to read or write in English, this didn't stop them from speaking in their own language and even singing in their own language. So it was known for slaves to sing Negro spiritual songs such as Kumbaya. Slaves who were brought from West Africa was known to sing this song in South Carolina and Georgia. Kumbaya is said to mean come by here in English, but I will tell you the real spiritual meaning behind these words. The name of the God of the Bible in Hebrew is originally called Yahuwah. The short form of this name is called Yah, which is where we get the phrase hallelujah from, which means praise be to Yah. Also, every prophet mentioned in the Bible had the short form of God's name mentioned in their own names originally in Hebrew, including the Messiah, Yeshua, before they was given their new names pronounced in English. See, the letter J didn't exist until the 15th century, so the term Jew, which is derived from Hebrew, was originally called Yahuda. This was the original name of Jacob's son, which we now call Judah, which is where the word Jew comes from. But when you pronounce it in Hebrew, you could hear the name of God in it, Yahuwah, Yahuda. So when these black slaves were getting whipped and forced to work long hours on the plantations, they would sing out Kumbaya, which means come by here, Yah. The phrase of this Negro spiritual has nothing to do with the English language at all. So this meant that the slave owners had no idea that their slaves was calling out to their God in Hebrew, Kumbaya, come here, Yah. I also discovered in an article written in 1897 that there was a Negro who can write in Hebrew. This can be found online in the Houston Daily Post. But this is significant evidence that could back up the claims that black people are the descendants of the Jews of the Bible. The article starts off saying, Negro who can write in Hebrew, he is deaf and dumb and comes from an African town. It then goes on to say, a young African Negro has been in the city for the last few days who claims to be a Hebrew. He is deaf and dumb and as black as the ace of spades. He carries a pad of paper with him and answers all questions by writing them in Hebrew and Lashon Kodesh. What excites the most wonder is that he writes in Lashon Kodesh, which is the language of the book of Moses. It is made a special study of, spoken and written with ease only by the rabbis and highly educated Hebrews. So before I continue, I searched up the language of Lashin Kadesh to see what its meaning was, and it says it's a mixture of Hebrew and Aramaic used in prayer books and holy texts read by all Jews. It says the term is also used as a name for the classical Hebrew language in ways that emphasize its ancient, holy aspects rather than its modern incarnations. So basically, this black man from Africa was able to read and write in the original Hebrew language that Moses and the prophets spoke in. And remember, this was in 1897, so this was years before we got the modern day nation of Israel. Continuing on, it says the Negro was sent to one of the rabbis of the Hartford, who is perfectly satisfied that he is a Hebrew. He says that he came from a large town in Africa where there is a tribe of about 20,000 black Hebrews who speak Lachin Kadesh and are quite prosperous. He also says that his father is a rabbi in that town, and that is why his father took the trouble to teach him to write these languages, which needs an extra amount of labor on account of his being deaf and dumb. Now, if you're unaware, there are many Hebrews that was in Africa before the transatlantic slave trade. You can watch my previous videos on that if you're interested. But this specific black man said that there was about 20,000 black Hebrews that was a part of his tribe where he came from. The article goes on to say, he says his people not only write Lashin Kadesh, but it is their speaking language as well. He left home a few years ago and has seen a great deal of the world. In each town, he hunts up the Jewish section, and there they give him clothes, food, and money. What surprises him, he writes, is that no Hebrew knows of his countryman in Africa. And that's the end of the article. So this was not the only case of a black man speaking the Semitic languages. There was also a man named Omar Said who came from West Africa. He was a Muslim scholar who can read, write, and speak in Arabic before he was transferred over to the United States as a slave. But let's see if there's any more historical accounts about black people being able to read and write in the Hebrew language.
This is First African Baptist Church, the oldest black church in North America. The building built by slaves. The gentleman that laid the first brick laid the last. The balcony hold pews that actually were built by slaves. They have the oldest information in this building. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing. Downstairs, the air holes that the people, when they hid beneath the floors, they were able to use are actually African prayer symbols. This building was built during the night hours. It was also not only used as a place of worship, but it was used as a place to help out on the Underground Railroad. One of the greatest missions, I believe, ever taken out and carried through was handled beneath the floors of First African Baptist Church. We have the oldest information in this building. That information is written in cursive Hebrew writing.
So in the very first black church in America, the founders of this church had documents that was written in cursive Hebrew writing. But we're barely scratching the surface here. Did you know that in the 16th and 17th century, the Europeans had maps showing the kingdom of Judah on the slave coast, which is where majority of slaves were sold by the millions? So why would there be a kingdom of Judah in West Africa? Remember, the word Jew comes from Judah. So by calling this place the kingdom of Judah, it's insinuating that Jews must have been there. Or why else would Africa have a random kingdom called Judah by the Portuguese? So if there was indeed Jews in the kingdom of Judah located in West Africa, and millions of Africans were brought from this specific place all the way until the 1860s, wouldn't that mean that these were Jews who were being brought to America? Now, if you think that's just a coincidence, there's also an older map from 1492 which shows there being a Gulf of the Jews. So black slaves did not only come from West Africa, but they also came from Central Africa. And this 1492 Portuguese map shows there being a Gulf of the Jews. It says Golfo de Judeo. Now, the first regions to be colonized by Europeans was located in Central Africa, parts of the Congo, as well as Angola. And historically, it is said that there was black Portuguese Jews who settled in these central parts of Africa. So if you look at a map of the transatlantic slave trade, you can see that it was from these regions that majority of black slaves were taken from. The Kingdom of Judah in West Africa and the Gulf of the Jews in Central Africa. So this is probably why there used to be a village in Manhattan, New York that was called the Land of the Blacks. It is documented that there was black people living in the lower parts of Manhattan, New York, and they had their own community before they was kicked out of their homes and had everything rebuilt. And if you was to search up the names of these black residents, you will find that they had the last names of Spanish and Portuguese Jews. Now, if you search up the meaning Judah, it means praise. So Judah was the tribe of worshipers and singers. So the millions of black slaves who were brought from the kingdom of Judah in Africa to America, are they known for being worshipers, singers, and dancers? I think we all know the answer to that, as almost every music genre in the United States was invented by black Americans. Gospel, blues, country, doo-wop, swing, jazz, R&B, soul, rock and roll, funk, disco, and hip hop. So evidently, it does appear that black people could be the descendants of Judah, who was a tribe of worshipers, singers, and dancers. And the one thing that black people always had in their music is soul. In Psalm 137, there's a verse about Jews being asked to sing a song while they're under captivity in Babylon. It says, "By the rivers of Babylon we sat and wept, and we remember Zion. There on the poplar trees we hung our harps, for there our captors asked for songs. Our tormentors demanded songs of joy. They said, 'Sing us one of the songs of Zion.' How can we sing the songs of Yahuwah while in a foreign land?" Now, this reminded me of Billie Holiday, who was a famous black musician known for jazz. Her most famous song was called Strange Fruit, which was quite controversial at the time because it talked about black people being hung on poplar trees. It was this song that would make her a target on the FBI's watch list. But before this, white America had no problem with her singing songs of joy, just like this Psalm 137 verse says. And since we're talking about black people being hung on trees, there's actually a Bible verse that talks about anyone being hung on a tree is cursed. It says, "Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, 'Cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree.'" Galatians chapter 3, verse 13. So if you read the Old Testament, you will see that the Hebrews was eventually placed under this curse of the law due to their disobedience to God and the rejection of his son, Yahshua. So this verse says that the only way to be redeemed from this curse of the law is to believe in Yahshua, who became a curse for the Hebrews. As it is written, "Cursed is everyone who is hanged from a tree." Yahshua was hung from a tree. He was crucified. So black bodies hanging from a tree in America could have been a sign that black people was under the curse of the law mentioned in Deuteronomy chapter 28. Even in chapter 21, verse 22 through 23 in Deuteronomy, it says, "If a man has committed a sin worthy of death, he needs to be put to death and hung on a tree." It then says, "For he that is hung on a tree is accursed of God." So by the Hebrews being rebellious and rejecting their Savior, it can be said that they had committed a sin that was worthy of death by their God, Yahuwah. So the only way for them collectively to be redeemed from this curse of the law was for them to return. You see, the more you read the Bible as a black person, you're going to relate to it because you can see the story fits exactly what happened to you. It fits into your history. For example, Joel chapter 3 verse 6, it says, "The children of Judah and the children of Jerusalem was sold to the Greeks, that you might remove them far from their borders." In the exact same way, black people was also sold to the Greeks, aka white people. They was removed from their homelands, just like the Bible verse is saying about the Jews. So the more you read and start making these connections, you're going to see that these can't just be coincidences. Like on this old slave poster, just read what it says. It says, to be sold on board the ship. It says, a choice cargo of about 150 fine, healthy, fine Hebos. That word Hebo actually means Hebrew. So they're saying to be sold 150 fine Hebrews. So to be the people of the book, not only do you have to be the blood descendants, but you also have to fit the description of what the book is saying about you. And black people fit the description. You see, it says in Deuteronomy 28:15 that all these curses will come upon you if you do not obey the God of your fathers and obey all his laws, statutes, and commandments. So as a black American, if you was to go through all these curses and read them and compare them to the status of black people today and in past history, you'll be able to make the connection that this is speaking about our people. Even the more specific verses can relate to black people. It says Deuteronomy 28, chapter 49 through 50, Yahuwah will bring a nation against you from far, from the end of the earth, as swift as the eagle flies, a nation whose language you do not understand, a nation of fierce countenance, which does not respect the elderly, nor show favor to the young. This is talking about our history. This is black history. We have the evidence to show that we've gone through this. Watch this clip.
Available in color. The many surviving examples of such postcards tell a horrendous story. They were meant to address the people willing to use the lives of black children to collect a prized commodity, alligator skin. The white hunters were using human blood and flesh to lure monstrous crocodiles and alligators. To prepare for the activity, it is said that some white people kidnapped black children, tied them to a string, and dropped them in the swamps. Others would get groups of children and order them to stay over the alligator swamp, near the open mouths of hungry alligators. These children were fed to the predator's hole. This is a documented event that can also be seen in old artifacts, such as product packaging and knickknacks. Here is a classic example of household ornaments that were sold in areas where alligator baits were deemed a tourist attraction. At the time, the shelves in stores were covered with these decorative objects. These antiques come in bold colors and highly intricate designs that don't shy away from America's brutal past. Many of these trinkets are displayed in the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Imagery.
There's even the curse that mentions the Hebrews serving their enemies while being naked and having a chain of iron being placed upon their necks. There's even the curse that the Hebrews will become an astonishment, a proverb, a byword, which we mentioned in the beginning of this video. We are called Negroes, Blacks, African Americans, which does not define our true identity. Even the prophet Joel talks about the Hebrews losing their heritage. It says in Joel chapter 2, verse 17, that spare your people, Yahuwah, make your heritage not a reproach, a byword among the nations. Why should they say among the people, where is their God? It even says that your sons and daughters will be sold into other people, and there's nothing that you can do about it in Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 32. So the point is, nobody on earth fit these descriptions of the curses more than black people. In fact, the Bible says it is by these curses that they will discover who they are. In Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 46, it says, these curses will be a sign and a wonder upon you and your descendants forever. This is why our Black history leaders, such as Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, and Nat Turner, had that connection with the Bible. So now that we are discovering that we are the descendants of the Israelites in the Bible, what happens next? What does that mean for us now as a people? We already know about the Bible prophecy that brought us to where we are today, but is there any Bible prophecy about the future of black people who are in the land of their captivity? There is, but I won't get into it today for the sake of time. But I'll leave you guys with this last verse that speaks about the hope and redemption of God's people. It says, "Therefore, this is what Yahuwah says. Now I will restore Jacob from captivity, and I will have compassion on the whole house of Israel, and I will be jealous for my holy name." Ezekiel chapter 39, verse 25. Yah bless.